Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon of August 8th, 2021. We have an important and hopefully inspiring discussion today in store for you about inspiration and its role in cultivating the kind of future that we wish to see, a future where the transhumanist vision takes hold and we have an abundance of technological advancements, including in the realm of longevity. We have a distinguished panel joining us today, including our Director of Applied Innovation, David Shoemaker, our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our Director of Longevity Outreach, Ben Ballweg, our Legislative Director, Jason Geringer, our Director of Community Resilience, Alexandria Black, our Technology Advisor and Foreign Ambassador in Spain, Dr. Jose Cordero, and our special guest today is Gary Abramson. Gary is a designer, product developer, and creative consultant with a strong interest in technology, nature, and futurism. Since 1998, he has provided design, marketing, and creative consulting services to a broad range of clients in a variety of industries through his company, Moonburn Creative. He is also a principal in Evidence Productions and has produced and directed several short films and a featured documentary film. He was born and raised in Miami, Florida. He graduated summa cum laude from the University of Florida with degrees in finance and economics. So truly a Renaissance man and a nature enthusiast. He has explored jungles in Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, Mexico, Cuba, Kenya, Rwanda, and India. He has traveled throughout Western Europe and much of the United States. He is a licensed pilot and aviation enthusiast, an avid traditional archer, and a sport rock climber. So he has really savored a lot of what life has to offer, and we're quite excited to have him as our guest today. Welcome, Gary, and please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Genevieve, for that wonderful introduction. I want to just preface that I'm truly honored to be presenting to the Transhumanist Party. This is the future of humanity, and I feel that what this party advocates for is literally a better future for all of us. And there's also a truth in that this future is coming, whether we like it or not. So paving the groundwork for acceptance of it, for our holistic participation in it is extremely important. And one of the reasons why it is so important is so that we all have the opportunity to participate in this future. It doesn't have to be left for future generations who've overcome social stigma and the challenges that we're facing to make these things happen. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and start this presentation. Okay. So this is about cultivating. Okay, can you see, by the way? You see the presentation? Okay, great. So what we're going to talk about is cultivating inspiration for the transhumanist future in a world of emotions. A lot of the limitations that we are facing, a lot of the challenges that the transhumanist movement faces are basically in the face of emotions. If it was purely rational, we really wouldn't have to deal with much. We simply make the progress that we're capable of making. So we are emotional creatures. Emotions are an evolutionary adaptation. They helped us to survive and thrive from the Paleolithic era until now. So emotions have bound us into tribes, and they together as tribal entities helped us defend against the threats of nature. We acquisitively exploited what seemed like unlimited bounty, and we laid claim to the water hole with the pugnacity to war over it with those who are not in our tribe. So we still feel tribalism. Oh, let me get there. So we still feel tribalism today. We feel it deeply, and we're very pugnacious still as well. When we experience the design language and iconology of our favorite sports teams and our religions and our political factions and our nations, from the instinctual protection of our vital resources, including our social structures, come the emotional underpinnings of xenophobia and prejudice and nationalism. And even though we are exponentially more technologically advanced and culturally sophisticated, we are still cavemen at an emotional level, except with smartphones and nuclear weapons. So until we learn to debug our emotions, this is the stuff that we're working with. So I've often heard it said that we are above nature, that we're special, but we're literally our own ecosystems with more microorganisms in our body than cells. We're interwoven with nature and the patterns within it in ways we have yet to understand. It's literally in the patterns of our DNA, of which you share almost half with this lily, as are the genes that create our neuron synaptic structures that allow for emotion. So emotion compels us to connect with the world around us. Through it, we experience a blooming discovery of patterns, aesthetics, boundaries, unity, implied meanings, projection. And so we infuse it into the structures of our own realities. We often borrow the design ingenuity of nature. This is the James Webb Space Telescope. It's going to unfold like a flower in the ether, a $10 billion golden space lotus. So the question is this artificial or as much a part of nature as the lily? In fact, no matter how artificial of a construct we create, be it an inevitable merger of organic and synthetic material and intellect, everything that we are, everything that we create and evolve into is and always will be part of nature. We only see it through the lens of biological chance because that is the only frame of reference we have had until now. And if we don't fall victim to the great filter, the greater part of our existence will surely be engineered, and our happenstance period of evolution may seem equivalent to our embryonic origins. So we obsess over patterns, and of course, we obsess over patterns in nature and design all manner of explanations for them in our existential yearning for meaning and purpose. We seek pattern and live by habit. Patterns help us create an algorithmic understanding of the world. Our habits are our algorithms for survival. When we do the same things tomorrow that let us live through today, we instinctually feel we'll live through tomorrow as well. It doesn't mean the patterns we think we identify or the habits we make are accurate or optimal, but we feel them by our nature. And at an instinctual level that drives our emotions. And then we use the power of our rational minds to justify how we feel, regardless of the reality of how things are. This is why we see gods that solipsistically favor our survival in the patterns of the stars, or at least an astrological foretelling of our good fortune. And without any doubt, these patterns are highly informative into our design language and reflected into the way we design our world. And because we're emotionally connected to our belief in the explanations of these patterns at a survival level, challenging one's beliefs can feel like a threat to one's survival. So as transhumanists, when we are challenging the patterns of biological existence, it can be perceived as a threat to survival at a deeply base level by those who are not identified with this potentiality for our future. They may feel it as an emotional threat to their life as they know it. So we are living in a world of material reality. With the current state of technological development, our culture, and by virtue design in our culture, is rapidly shifting from that material reality to digital or scanned coded reality. We have virtual portals through which to experience captured and created media. And from that, we're gradually shifting to an augmented reality in which the objects and structures in our material world are rapidly becoming a canvas for our individualized projected realities. And even these objects may disappear from our perceptions of reality altogether. So something to consider, for example, for modern architects, if you've ever seen projection mapping, where you can completely transform the design intention of a building, everything that's around us in the physical world will eventually be a canvas for augmented reality. And eventually, as we design a wholly synthetic virtual reality, as brilliantly depicted in The Matrix, virtual reality will be so real that it cannot be sensorily discerned from the material world. And perhaps as we plug the generational descendants of kernel and Neuralink directly into our connectome, base reality may one day be only accessible to us if we can even find the red pill. And whether or not we want to find it could become the great existential question of our individual consciousness. And this is where we're headed. So the challenge is, as we dive into this digital realm of ever more created in virtual reality, design in all its forms itself is becoming refocused from our collective experience to ever more targeting of the emotions of the individual. This is the model of Facebook, YouTube, Google, and Amazon, ultimately designing algorithms that can play to your emotions with literal AI virtuosity. Even as the internet allows us to be more interconnected than ever, we are also becoming, by design, ever more socially and politically siloed. So the question is, can we agree on reality? We're becoming so siloed that we may lose connection even with our collective reality. Our deepest patterns and even subconscious psyche is being quantified and integrated into the algorithms that they present. You may also be interested in suggestions to us that we see less and less of the total reality unless we proactively seek it. We're becoming so siloed, we are literally losing our ability to agree on reality, and therefore the reality of our collective future is at stake. Things like who won the election, is climate change real, is COVID a hoax, cancel culture and distillation of acceptable norms until we become tribes of one. If we're fighting as cavemen over virtual water holes, we diminish our ability to fully engage the incredible opportunities of our world and awesome possibilities of our future. Part of this is fueled by tribalism, part is fueled by defending the patterns of our nature, part is fueled by losing connection with the realities of others as we become more insular. So in this world of emotions, how can media and engineering design play a part in keeping us together and focused on inspiring a future that fuels the possibilities we as transhumanists yearn for? So Antoine de Saint-Exupéry had a great saying: if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather the wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. And for that reason, I believe this is one of the greatest images ever created. This is a real in-the-camera photo, no Photoshop. This is SpaceXs Star Man, literally on its way to Mars, sitting in Elon Musk's personal Tesla, mounted on the second stage of a SpaceX Falcon Heavy. This is a vision by design that yearns for the cosmic seas. It cuts through silos of tribalism, division, and gloom, and uses first principles thinking to bypass our deeply ingrained patterns and revel in collective awe of what we can do in base reality if we choose. I believe that it is through emotion, stirring applications of design like this, that we can refocus and renew our culture towards intrigue, discovery, science, creativity, and dreams of the awesome possibilities of our future, including all of the incredible realms of our transhumanist potential. So that, thank you. That concludes my presentation part, and I'm happy to participate in a discussion. Let me stop sharing here.
Yes, thank you very much, Gary, for that inspiring presentation, and quite an informative presentation too, because I think your remarks hold some of the keys to how we can enable the transhumanist vision to take root in the broader society. Now, I have for many years now seen these residual Paleolithic era tribal types of emotions as an obstacle to achieving the transhumanist vision, in the sense that our technical capabilities are so much greater than our state of societal advancement. And there is a lot of cultural reluctance, cultural resistance, cultural misunderstanding still. And yet we don't have the ability to re-engineer people's brains at this level of technological advancement. So somehow during the next few decades, we're going to have to muddle through with our current set of emotions and all that they entail. And you suggest it's possible to do that in a positive way by kind of reframing the vision so as to inspire people based on some of those emotions. So I wonder, is that the roadmap then to the transhumanist future, to use the emotions instead of trying to alter the emotional mix of humanity?
Well, I think there are a couple facets to that. One is, obviously, at some point we want to transcend our emotional limitations, so that we can, to whatever extent possible, utilize them as a powerful tool. Clearly, emotions drive survival, and as much as a single cellular creature detects a light source or the dimming of a light source, it might interpret that as a predator. It might try to find the light again. We, at an emotional level, are always seeking the light of what will help us to survive. But we're at a state where a lot of people are completely ruled and governed by their emotions in a way that they don't ever step outside of them. And as much as there are obviously negative emotions are an incredibly powerful tool, and we should use all the tools that are available to us. So in that sense, the sense of awe, the sense of inspiration, the sense of possibilities is an incredible driving force that I think the transhumanist movement, and pretty much any movement, would be crazy to set aside. We're trying to create everything in the context of humanity, and our biggest driving force is our emotions. So let's tap into those in a positive light. One of the big challenges is overcoming a lot of the base emotions, the negative emotions. I find that as a transhumanist, I am a cryonicist. I do biohacking. I wear glucose meters and aura rings. I'm trying to optimize myself so that I can live into a transhumanist era. I find that a huge amount of people they're just afraid of the future. As being a vocal advocate for cryonics and extreme life extension, most of the people that I talk to don't want to live into the world that they imagine. Terrorists are going to get nuclear weapons, and look at, we're destroying nature, and what's going to be left. So having these extremely positive visions that transcend all of that connect to people in a way like, there's all this danger, there's all this craziness, but damn, that is so cool. I have to live just long enough to see that, can create the bridge that hopefully can bridge us into that better future.
Yes, so it's interesting. You spoke about harnessing the best of the human emotions to support this kind of positive vision, and also of the importance of people's views of the external world and what the future could be like, affecting their own attitudes and their own emotional mix when they encounter these ideas of life extension or technological progress. So that is indeed quite valuable to consider. Now, let us go to Jose Cordero, who has a question.
Yes, hello, my dear friend Gary. Good to see you.
Hermano.
And we should talk in Spanish. You need to brush up your Spanish a little bit so that when you come back next to Madrid, to Spain, you can speak better. But transhumanists might be able to communicate telepathically. So actually, we will not be able or need to speak in these mundane languages. So that is my first question. And then after that, I have another quick one.
So what I'm hearing as, can you state it as a question? What do
you believe that we will be able to communicate telepathically? Maybe like Elon Musk has said with Neuralink, connect our brain to the cloud and maybe to other brains.
I believe that's inevitable. I don't know if it will be telepathic in the sense of supernatural, but definitely with Bluetooth or some wireless technology, we will create technologies that certainly 50 years ago, 100 years ago will seem, or even today, will seem like complete magic, inconceivable alien technology. The limitation of how we talk. I mean, I know I'm a pretty fast talker. Maybe I get in a few hundred words a minute, but obviously when we have the bandwidth of Neuralink and what that promises, we can transmit libraries of data like the Matrix. We can literally download enormous amounts of information into our minds. I think it's going to be inevitable. It's going to be inevitable. I think where people find a challenge around that and where there's an opportunity to find, actually the Matrix is a really, really great positive reinforcement of that. I think people often feel overwhelmed by knowledge and information availability. I know myself, I've had to do a lot of work on curtailing Wikipedia spiraling deep dives where I could look up one thing in Wikipedia and then click on every hyperlink in the Wikipedia article, and 6 hours later, I'm still amassing information. So the ability to download the totality of human information on a given subject, literally in a matter of seconds, in the way that the Matrix presents is really exciting. And for that reason, I think it's a really, even though it's dystopian and dark, it actually shows really, really optimistic vision for the future that we can be attracted by and gravitate towards. So.
Okay, my second question was about dates, different dates. You know, our friend Ray Kurzweil, he normally talks about 2 dates, 2029, 2030, and then 2045. So basically, he believes that by the end of this decade, we will reach longevity escape velocity or the Methuselarity, and also pass the Alan Turing test. And then by 2045, we will reach the singularity and immortality. What is your takes on those 2 dates and those 4 happenings, 4 different things? Alan Turing test, longevity escape velocity, the singularity, and immortality.
Okay, you have to let me know if I forget anything, but longevity escape velocity, as I don't know if Aubrey de Grey was the original proponent of that. It's an amazing concept. I mean, it's I'm all for it. I'm all for all 4 of those concepts. I think longevity escape velocity will happen organically. I think all 4 of those things will actually happen organically. There's going to be advancement in all of those areas by deep thinkers and technologists. I think that things such as blockchain will create a more democratization and decentralization, less profit motives around a lot of areas, so that these technologies can be further explored as a human community. And that's my thinking is that they're all going to happen, and it will be inevitable. The question for us with all 4 of those is, will they happen in our lifetime? Will the future of immortality, will the future of ultimate transhumanism existing in digital constructs be in our future? In a long enough timeline, if we don't destroy ourselves through the great filter, like, we will achieve this technologically. There are some questions as to, what is the true seat of consciousness? Can we actually reproduce consciousness digitally? I mean, who's to say we're not a digital construct already? We don't, the chance that we're in base reality is currently is almost zero anyway. So I think that as well, achieving longevity, escape velocity makes all of the other items inevitable, because once you're on a long enough timeline that anything can happen, I think our technology is going to advance to someday push up against the edges of the laws of physics, whatever that looks like. And to the extent we can, maybe we can find that we can bend the laws of physics. And it seems inconceivable to us now, but maybe when our intellect is augmented and trillions of times more intelligent than we are now, who knows what we can transcend, even the limits of what we perceive as a universe, into a multiverse, into different realities. So I think, what's interesting is when we look at the limits of what creativity envisions in a sci-fi future, the truth is that the actual deep future is probably so incredible and so amazing that our ant-like or bacteria-like minds are literally incapable of imagining what the future really is. And one great example of that, I love Star Trek. I think it has this incredible utopian vision of where we could be, as does the Orville, which I think is kind of picking up the mantle of old Star Trek. But almost every Star Trek episode devolves into a hand-on-hand combat fighting aliens. Even The Matrix, almost every movie out there that involves transformation or saving involves into some parkour kung fu extravaganza. Somehow we even in the deep future, where we're demonstrating through our imagination the tribalistic, pugnacious evolutionary origins that we're coming from. And as a result, even in our best sci-fi movies, we're usually in hand-to-hand combat with some technologically advanced alien. I'm glad it didn't happen in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It actually almost did in Arrival. You had some factions that were ready to nuke the aliens, but yeah. So I think we'll eventually transcend that, but at this point, it's hard for us to imagine beyond what our brains are capable of imagining. Does that make sense, Jose? Is there anything?
It makes sense, but my question was about the timing.
Timing, the timing. I don't know. I mean, we're obviously on an exponential future. If we have to fight the currents of humanity, it maybe slows it down by a few years. But then again, we have forces like Elon Musk, who's just an absolute force of nature. What he's doing is incredible. I think he's the greatest example of how we can transcend our limitations, even though there might be things that limit us. Look how slow we were to adopt electric car technology, even though in 1910, there were more electric cars on the road than gas-powered cars. Like, what the hell happened for 110 years, But still, there will be developments by visionaries such as Elon Musk, such as Vitalik Buterin and Richard Hart, who are creating new blockchain infrastructures that will accelerate transactions, information exchange, learning, technological development. So I think, the predictions are good. And what I would say is I look forward to being around in those times to see how those predictions pan out. And I'm sure that if we're approaching it and it needs a few more years, that hopefully Ray will be around too, and he'll amend his predictions accordingly. So.
Yes,
good,
indeed.
Good. Thank you.
And I do think the future will surprise all of us. As you mentioned, Gary, there is still so much about the universe that we do not know from our present vantage point, but with augmented intelligence, with the ability to explore more of existence, I think we will find a lot of the answers that shed light upon these questions. And timeframes, of course, are contingent. They're dependent on what people do, what people decide to do. And I think this is where we can have an influence through conversations like this one. Now, you mentioned the James Webb telescope, and we had an internal discussion here in our Zoom chat about when the James Webb telescope is planned to launch. NASA has already delayed the launch date on several occasions, most recently to October 31st of 2021. However, problems with the European Ariane 5 launch vehicle have threatened to push the launch date back even further to November or early December, according to Wikipedia. Nonetheless, it is likely to happen within a year's time. And Alexandria wonders, with the improved capabilities of this telescope, what would happen if we find that we're not alone, we're not the only sentient civilization in existence? Would that, even based on our current emotional mix, enable people to see humanity more as one tribe and diminish some of these tribalist hostilities that have unfortunately characterized our species up to now?
That is a great question. And it is a great experiment. And we'll actually see what happens. I mean, there is the possibility that in finding alien technology or alien civilization, that we can really see ourselves as a unified tribalistic sense, like, wow, we're earthlings. There's also the possibility of factionating, where there's a number of us that are like, hey, let's get to know these aliens and learn their culture and see what their technology is. And a great part of us that are like, well, this could be a threat. We need to develop all kinds of new weaponry. We need to have a defensive posture. I think you can see that even with the Defense Department's release of the report around these sightings, where they have radar readings that correspond with visual readings, and UV and IR, and actual pilots flying alongside these craft. And even though they go from 80,000 feet down to under the ocean in 1 second, they don't say that they're alien technologies. But more so, the whole report is couched in the context of what threat does this present to us. So, I mean, it's so preposterous. I mean, we could launch our most powerful nuclear weapons against that kind of technology. It would probably be like, launching a spitball against an elephant. It's not gonna do anything. So, ironically, and I think even Ronald Reagan maybe once said this, something that would unify humanity is if there was a threat from aliens. And you see that in Independence Day and movies like that, where there's this great alien threat and all of humanity has to unify. I can't imagine also what would happen religiously. Just humans, like as a species, are very solipsistic, and we often think the whole universe was created for us. If there's alien technology or alien civilizations out there, you may have people who are so ingrained in their religions that they want to go proselytize, Mediterranean sky gods to aliens on distant planets. And you may have other humans who will see the aliens as new gods. So this is all through the lens of our emotional construct, and it's really going to be a petri dish. One other thing to consider is, if we can detect aliens anywhere in the universe, I mean, what a gift, in the sense that life formed on Earth not too long after Earth formed. And it's totally possible in a universe that's over 13 billion years old that there are alien civilizations that are billions of years more technologically advanced than we are. You can let Ray Kurzweil figure out what that technology might look like. But we may be like primordial slime of microspheres compared to aliens. Their level of technological development, their interaction with reality. So if we can actually see alien existence in the physical construct of the universe as we see it with our limited senses and our limited ability to detect things, that might bode well for us actually having some meaningful interactions with alien life. As well, the aliens will likely have a totally alien culture. They may not be humanoid. I've seen arguments that they necessarily will, because there's convergent evolution on many branches of the evolutionary tree, but they might be so alien in so many ways, just figuring out how to communicate. I predict, unless we are very methodical and rational, augment our own intelligence, it will be really challenging for us to have meaningful exchanges with aliens, unless it's their intent and they have the capacity to have it with us. So I really hope we find some things out there, because if we found like a Dyson sphere floating around another star, what that means to us is like, this is what's technologically possible. This is what we can create with our future. And the world of Star Trek, or the positive aspects of Star Wars and all the things we imagine, are not really imaginary. They're just indicators of what we can achieve if we put our minds to it.
Yes, indeed. And this is quite fascinating, because Star Trek and Star Wars are definitely examples of, in many ways, uplifting science fiction that has inspired several generations in even delving into these kinds of realms and these kinds of questions. And Star Trek and Star Wars have both appeared in our YouTube chat. Daniel Twett points out that the term humanistic futurism would describe both the thinking of Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, and George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars. Daniel also points out that Gene Roddenberry was vehemently opposed to the ant and beehive kind of utopia, as Daniel heard him state when he was asked about it at Equicon 2 in 1975. So Daniel goes quite a way back with his enthusiasm for Star Trek and science fiction. And even though Star Trek does feature a lot of hand-to-hand combat with aliens, it also features a future in which multi-species coexistence with tremendous diversity among the different alien species has been achieved, sometimes with conflicts, with tensions flaring up, but the broader universe of Star Trek is highly cosmopolitan and definitely emotionally more evolved than we are right now. One of the species in that universe, of course, are the Vulcans, and Daniel points out Vulcans became advanced by triumphing over their emotions. Do you see a Vulcan path in humankind's future?
Well, one interesting thing to think about when you're looking at considering multi-speciation of, aliens, it is interesting that, especially in Star Trek, there's an extreme bias towards biological entities. There's not many engineered entities, whether biological or synthetic. But we as humans, through the process of transhumanism, will inevitably become multi-species in ourselves. We're going to have humans that will augment their intelligence. We're going to have humans that will choose to go as digital as they can. Some will try to have multiple consciousnesses. Some of us may try to re-engineer our biological constructs, but stay in a physical body. So, looking back at humanity in 100 years or 500 years or 1,000 years, I don't think we'll see like these are humans. I think we'll see like there are these digital constructs. I can't remember the name of the monks in Star Wars that are literally brains in a bubble with the spider legs. And some of us might be completely physically augmented to the point where we're totally synthetic constructs that are vehicles for our consciousness. So you would look at each of these and be like, that is a completely different species. We'll likely have the advantage of having, from our common development and evolution, we'll have the ability to communicate with each other. Hopefully that gap won't be bridged. It's possible, that gap won't be severed, but it's also possible that there are a lot of humans who, through fear or conviction in the path of life, including death, as a hardcore life extensionist, I encounter a lot of people who are like, well, death is part of life, and death gives meaning to life, and what happens, after, if you don't experience death, you're not experiencing life and the afterlife and all that. There may be a huge component of humanity that does not want to be augmented, that does not choose the transhumanist route, even though they're all transhumanists. If anyone has a filling or a pacemaker or cosmetic surgery, whatever it is, they're literally across that threshold of transhumanism. So we might evolve into like Homo superioris. We'll have a whole nother species of humans. That's the natural evolution of the human species, where we are massively intellectually enhanced, massively more connected with all sources of information, almost inconceivably physically more enhanced, engineered to be adaptable to, why do you need a spacesuit on Mars? Just, re-engineer yourself so that that's a natural habitat for you. Especially areas of divided and multi-consciousness. And I think something that might border on the comfort zone for a lot of people is the new incarnation of Battlestar Galactica, where the Cylons, I would love to be a Cylon in the new construct. I know that there were the evil enemies and just trying to gain agency over their enslavement by humans, and the same with in Blade Runner with the replicants, but especially the Cylons and Battlestar Galactica. They get to exist in a physical form that is familiar to us and comfortable to us, and yet their consciousness is constantly being backed up. And when they die, they simply, let a backup of themselves out into the universe to continue experiencing everything that life is. So, that might be a stopgap for, and I think, ironically, as much as it was presented as the enemy and something that maybe we shouldn't be aspiring to, that I think it for those of us who are dialed into it, I want that. And I think probably a lot of members of the Transhumanist Party would identify with that and see that as the better future. And why are these the bad guys? They have literally a future that we would love to engineer.
Yes, that is quite fascinating to see how a transhumanist perspective would shift our views of certain entities in science fiction worlds. But you also pointed out the diversity among the humans of the future will be immense based on what technological innovations they apply, and for some segments of the population, what technological innovations they choose not to apply. Also, there was an interesting discussion on the future of emotions. And Mike Lazine points out in our YouTube chat, how can a person enjoy the entertainment of the future without the emotions of awe and joy and happiness, which you discussed in your presentation? He wonders what would be the point of not having any emotions at all. And most likely, in my view, humans would choose to retain at least many of the emotions that we have. Mike thinks it would be better to get rid of all the negative emotions and keep the positive ones. I would say I have a bit more of a nuanced view. I want the emotions to be aligned to the external reality. So you feel positive emotions about that which is objectively positive and beneficial, and you feel negative emotions about actual rather than illusory threats, genuine aspects of the world that could harm you. So we should feel really negative emotions about cancer and heart disease, for example, and try to overcome them to a much greater extent than many people do today. On the other hand, this diversity that you speak of for the future of humanity, do you think that would also lead to emotional diversity at the point where people can start to more selectively decide what emotions we want to have? Do you think there will be a divergence with some subsets of the population choosing to have different emotional mixes from others? And how would that affect human societies?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, on the one hand, we have our underlying instincts that we're born with and that create very strong emotions for survival. And then as we're raised, based on the experiences of our lives and the traumas of our lives, we have a whole emotional construct that's overlaid. It's often baked into our traumas of early childhood, our operating system, whatever environment we were formed in creates sort of our BIOS, and we associate that with survival. So sometimes, people like, why do they replicate the abusive relationships of their past? Well, at a very deep level, BIOS level, they're replicating what, at 3, 4, 5, 6 years old was the construct of survival in their world. So part of it, I think part of what can get us to a better future and more connected with healthy emotions, it's one of the hardest things to do. And it's kind of like, you got to go to the gym currently if you want to be fit. You got to eat good food if you want to, have good metabolism, a good biochemistry. You got to sleep well if you want to be rested and healed. You got to be low stress if you want to reduce cortisol and have less damage. And we have to really individually work on addressing our emotional traumas at an individual level to become actually more connected with what reality is, to become more empathetic with other people, with other worldviews, to be more comfortable in who we are individually and what we can become. So a lot of people in the world are acting out with deep emotional trauma, and just because they're the most powerful person in the world, or they're the president or a general or a leader of a massive corporation, it doesn't mean that they're creating things to insulate them from abuses they felt when they were 6 years old or whatnot. So we have to kind of work out and take care of ourselves at that level, and only through that lens of really healing ourselves and being comfortable with who we are and as our most authentic selves emotionally, can we have a healthy relationship with emotions. Then we're left with our base instincts, which still have fear and survival, and there's still tribalism and all these elements. I think you can see that, there's a huge amount of humans. I would again point to Elon Musk as a shining example of it, even though he is heading down the path of Neuralink. He's creating tangible things in the world, just Tesla and SpaceX. And even if you look at something like Tesla, he's not just building cars. He has there's an incredible AI system. It's one of the largest, I think it might be the second largest supercomputer in the world that is amassing all the visual data for the self-driving algorithms that the cars will run on, that will have other applications for Neuralink for sure. He's building alternative energy infrastructure, solar roofs, grid level power supplies, the motors, alloys, like all of this integrative technology. At the same time, you have people who are probably as intelligent as he is, and maybe more so, who spend all of their day immersed in some VR video game, and they're literally just stimulating, and people do this on social media, where I've had many friends who they could be watching a movie and they're going to be on their phone at a restaurant with friends, and they're on their phone. They cannot disengage. There's an emotional connection that is almost impossible to overcome. So, I think there will be some humans that will they just want to hit the reward button. Once that's dialed into your brain, why not just feel good all day? Why not feel orgasmic all day long? I don't know if you saw the movie, I think it was called Brainwave, where they were able to record experiences from one person, and then someone else could play it back into their mind. And there was an old man who found a sexual experience from somebody who recorded it, and he literally played it over and over and over in his mind until he went insane. I can't imagine that some people would just say, you know what? Why experience any pain or any discomfort? My life's going to be all hedonistic pleasure. So in the end, it comes down to a philosophical approach. Are you going to be a stoic? Are you going to be a hedonist? What's your philosophy of life? And hopefully there's enough of us that are grounded in reality and want to create and experience reality, take the red pill, that we can try to create the great things in reality and not just get lost into a virtual, I guess, pleasure-gasm.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with you. It's essential to have our emotions be anchored in reality. Alexandria Black points out in our internal chat that emotions are part of our signaling system, but the world changed too fast to adapt. And there may indeed be this wire-heading phenomenon, as it's sometimes characterized, where people find ways to stimulate these emotions, which initially played a useful role in human evolution, but they're stimulated in some way that's disassociated from real world benefits or situations. And I agree with you also that people have individual responsibility for how they manage their emotions and how they adapt their emotions to this changing reality. However, some of our viewers have pointed out certain obstacles. So for instance, Alexandria asks, how can we expect people to control emotions when emotions get gamified by tech platforms and governments? Sometimes the design of social media ecosystems like Facebook or Instagram or TikTok encourages people to pour a lot of their energy into those platforms rather than into externally useful projects. And Jennifer Hughes also points out that many emotions occur from societal conditioning. For instance, jealousy and greed, in her view, seem to come from having competitive rather than collaborative operating systems. I would say they come from a zero-sum mentality where people think there's a fixed pie of resources or status or power, and in order for them to gain, someone else has to lose, and that's where the negative emotions get activated. So in the face of these kinds of institutional or design obstacles, what can people do to regain their agency or maintain their control over their emotions?
Yeah, I mean, that is an excellent question that is just central to where we go from here. There is, in essence, warfare against us. We definitely have these base emotions. We do have wire heading, as Alexandria points out. And there are certainly a lot of entities that have an interest in gaining control and power and wealth that are going to utilize that over us. And why not? I mean, it's like if we want to overcome an insect infestation, it's like we'll use the insect's pheromones against them. What can they do about it? Nothing. It's baked into their construct. So I think I mean, in just the most rationalistic sense, there may end up being a natural selection, a Darwinistic process where people who are absolutely immersed in virtual realities, who are absolutely immersed in social media, will literally just go down those pathways, while those of us who are committed to dealing with reality and trying to bend reality will go and change the nature of the physical world, and inevitably the mechanisms and what enables the digital constructs in the first place. So I think also, great example of instinct of can we deal with reality? Can we deal with our emotions? If you look, for example, at the trend of obesity in the United States, there is a deep instinct to eat sugar and fat and salt. And a lot of that might have been very challenging for cavemen, our Paleolithic evolution in the primal blueprint sense of the word, or paleo lifestyle. So you would have had to run down the gazelle or the ground sloth or whatnot and fight it. You may not have eaten for a few days. You're not going to come across a tree full of big, juicy apples that are, 10 times bigger than a Paleolithic apple and that taste nice and sweet and are sugary. So that's just an example of our instincts just on autopilot. And the reality is that any human can choose to eat food that is not really high in sugar primarily, and also trans fats and all these other things. And even, within the life extension community, there's a huge focus on metformin, rapamycin, senolytics, but a lot of these technologies, they're just replicating the effects of fasting. So can we as humans just have the discipline to not eat for 3 days or 5 days and get the benefits of ketosis and autophagy and everything that these pills are trying to replicate? So it's clear that our human nature is it's so strong, because it's what, in a good way, and a way that we should be thankful for, allowed us to survive in a world of scarcity hundreds of thousands of years ago. So as much as we fight them today, and as much as it's a pain in the ass to deal with them, without them, we wouldn't be here. And we also likely wouldn't have the creativity that we have, and we wouldn't have the capacity to actually transcend them. So I think our best course is to try to create an awe-inspiring vision of the future, especially in reality, not just in Star Trek, where, man, wouldn't it be cool if we had warp drive and transporters and all that, but sending the Tesla to Mars. Just recently, SpaceX stacked their Starship at Boca Chica, Texas. And even though they have more work to do in the vehicles, you got to see what a full stacked Starship on a super heavy booster looks like. And it's awe-inspiring. It's twice as powerful as the Saturn V. It's mind-bending. It creates the kind of images and possibilities where it's like, I want to see that. I'm willing to stick around for 10 more years to see where this goes. And one other aspect that I think would be valuable, but is really challenging in the context of emotions, is there a way of creating a base algorithm for our existence that rewards efficiency and punishes externalities, and that rewards cooperation and punishes warring? And is there some algorithm that we can create such that our emotions are fit into that, where it drives us towards what we can rationally decide is the better future? And I think, I don't know who mentioned that will allow us to have our negative emotions actually serve as a driver towards what we rationally understand as a better future. And that's, if you're sitting around in the African plains 100,000 years ago, and you haven't eaten in a few days, you're probably going to start getting pretty hungry and hangry, and a lot more things are going to start looking like food to you. And at a deep level, you're going to get up and you're going to overcome whatever pain, whatever tiredness you have, whatever fears you have, and you're going to go get something to eat. Maybe you have to take your spear and prod a lion away from a kill to get food. And with that same strength of emotions, that hunger, we need to create a hunger within ourselves with a rationalized algorithm of our better future, so that we can overcome all those base emotions and have them work for us instead of against us.
Yes, and it's interesting that during this conversation, Elon Musk and his many endeavors have come up quite a few times. And Jason Geringer points out that Elon Musk attributes part of his success to the fact that he uses first principles thinking, which you also mentioned in your presentation. Now, it's also known that Elon Musk is actually quite an emotional individual, and he's been known to react emotionally in various situations, and yet he has this methodical, systematic approach to looking at the world, which perhaps creates a rational infrastructure within which he can deploy those emotions, and where even if he has an outburst of some sort, that outburst is still part of his process toward creating something of external value. So I would be interested to hear more of your thoughts on first principles thinking, how you think it helps Elon Musk, how it can help other people in terms of harnessing their emotions for good.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. I think first principles thinking is the basis for connecting with reality. A lot of us, reality is perception. Perception is reality. I can't remember where that exactly came from. I think it might have been something with in an advertising campaign. But perception is reality. And the closer that we can cut through our biases and prejudices and emotional, the things that we want to be true, the closer we can get to an actual useful reality. It's, I think there's an experiment where, I can't remember the exact specifics of it, where they had like a group of people who needed to, I don't know if it was like escape from a room, and they had two groups, and one, the people were told that people would be praying for them to escape, and the other, they weren't. And the people who were not told that they were being prayed for, took action, because they didn't assume that there would be some intervening force. And it's also true, I think, with the mouse treading in the water, where if you put a platform that it can stand on, the one mouse will just keep treading till it dies, and the other mouse will, I don't know if it seeks the platform or it drowns. So I think, I'm sorry, I lost track of the question. What was that?
The question was on first principles thinking and how it can be used.
Yeah, so I think no matter what we want to be true, it's really important to try to understand what is true. And I think in general, that's really, really uncomfortable. I mean, that is the red pill. That is seeing base reality. And, there's even a philosophical question of and that's presented within the Matrix. If you could live in this comfortable amazing construct that your life is great, and it's all an illusion, because in reality, life is totally dystopian. What does it matter? Your experience of existence is your experience of existence. But if we actually want to take the material world that we live in and do anything with it, and if we want to make exponential leaps in technology, if we want to achieve, what physics seems to purport as possible, can we have warp drive? Can we have, time? Is time necessarily linear? Who knows? We need to literally just throw away everything that we think is real and be willing to look at what things are. And as well, just the whole nature of us to use habits. There's also a nature to build on what has already been built on. I mean, culture is in itself the interactional habits that have been passed forward by our predecessors. And even though some of it we might look at externally and be like, that's freaking crazy, the intention of it is for us to survive and to be bonded and to survive external threats and xenophobically ward off, those who are trying to take our resources. So to divest ourselves of our culture, of our thinking, of the ways we've done things, traditions, why have we done it? Well, that's always the way it's been done. So that's the way we're going to continue to do it. Man, that's a really, really hard ask for a lot of people. It might take some sense of sociopathy or psychopathy to transcend that. But yeah, that's the foundation of, I think, our ultimate potential, is to be able to look at things as they are and not ask why, ask why not. There's a great scene in Apollo 13 with Gene Kranz, the mission director. I don't remember it exactly, I'll paraphrase, but like, don't tell me what this part was designed for, tell me what it can do. And that's the kind of first principles thinking that allowed us to bring Apollo 13 back, and ultimately what will be required for us to save ourselves and get into a transhumanist future that's optimistic and more inviting.
Yes, indeed. And it's interesting, John H. in our YouTube chat says that you were starting to sound a bit Nietzschean there in terms of starting from scratch, rejecting the cultural assumptions, or at least from the standpoint of first principles thinking, not automatically deferring to those cultural assumptions when you think about how to address a problem or how to move forward in a field of endeavor. So
yeah. Well, actually, one quick point with that is I don't know who's familiar with the four horsemen of the I forget what they call it, the anti-apocalypse or whatnot, but one of them is Daniel Dennett, who I really appreciate the fact that he loves going Christmas caroling. He loves the tradition. He enjoys it and savors the human experience and tradition of that, and yet he is able to take a step back and objectively look at things from the most rational point of view. So just because we step back from the things we're comfortable with in our cultures, that doesn't mean that we can't appreciate them, because ultimately, if things were only existed in the rational realm, where is the space for art and for creativity, and where does music come from, and all these human experiences that often transcend rationality? Ultimately, culture may become an artistic expression. It may become a collection of human creativity that we can celebrate and appreciate as much as we do, a Beethoven symphony or a Michelangelo sculpture.
Yes, indeed. And also on the subject of Nietzsche, I would consider him to be one of our allies in terms of this kind of approach to life and to understanding the world. I think he had some sympathies with life extension as well. In my illustrated children's book, Death is Wrong, he's one of the thinkers who is quoted as saying, is life not 1,000 times too short for us to bore ourselves? So he was also someone who was looking to the external world for opportunities, for ways in which human beings can enjoy and appreciate life and develop themselves in a constructive manner. And thank you to John H., by the way, for your super chat. John says these are the best $5 he has parted with today. So I appreciate that. And of course, a lot of the thanks for that also goes to Gary. So with regard to the role of emotions and how that may differ for different people, Jason Geringer suggests that there's a theory that there are two types of people, rationalists and intuitionists. And he says he doesn't know if that's true, but his observation is some people don't respond to rationality as well as others. Would you agree with that? Do you think that's a bit too simplistic? Do you think any person can be brought to appreciate a rational, methodical approach, or do you think some people need special techniques to reach them?
You know, I think this would get into a PhD level realm of psychology, and maybe in some cases psychiatry. I can just tell you from my own personal experience that I went a large part of my life not being deeply connected to my own emotions, and I was very rational. Empathy was a challenge at times, and I have to give credit where credit is due. I mean, the thing that really broke through all that was meeting my wife, Maria, who is the love of my life, and it created a level of emotion that was so far beyond anything I'd experienced that I literally had to learn to deal with my emotions. And in the process of that, I had to kind of deconstruct myself and spend a lot of time working through traumas and through limiting beliefs. And through that process, I became much more connected, not only to my emotional Tootsie Pop inner core, but also empathetically with others and able to really connect with other people in a loving and emotional and empathetic way. So I'm not sure that, I mean, there might be people who psychiatrically have brain formation, they might lack empathy centers in their brain and literally be incapable of experiencing emotions in the same way that other people can. But all things being equal, I think psychologically, we're all likely capable of experiencing both a rational connection with the world and a very deep emotional connection with ourselves and with others. Lots of us are limited through traumas and conditioning and whatnot to not be able to connect with that within us, because when you start connecting with that, you might feel sad, you might feel threatened, you might feel scared, and we create blocks with others. We lose ourselves in the way that some people lose themselves into drugs or lose themselves into video games. We lose ourselves behind emotional walls because it's hard for us to deal with our emotions. And in fact, that's where a huge amount of addiction comes from, and not just drug addiction and alcohol addiction, but people who play video games all day, people who are overthinkers. Overthinking is a way of avoiding reality. Procrastination is a way of avoiding being seen as you are, because no matter what happens, you can say, well, it really wasn't my best. I didn't have enough time. Well, what if you did have enough time and it was your best, and people could still judge you and say, you know what, you didn't do good enough. There's a fear of really being seen and connecting. So, I think that to the extent that we can be our most authentic selves, and we can be emotionally connected with ourselves and with others, we give permission to other people to be vulnerable and to accept themselves, and that will help dissipate their fears. And the dissipation of their fears will help them connect more with their own reality and our reality, and that will help them connect with base reality, which will help them see first principles thinking with a much clearer perspective, and that will allow us to evolve in a more, I guess, utopian and a more collectively enjoyable and desirable way than technology evolving along with our base emotions becoming more ingrained and justified.
Yes, indeed. And thank you for those insights, Gary. Particularly, I found interesting the idea that overthinking can be an avoidance of reality. Sometimes John H. describes it as paralysis by analysis in our chat. We have now a great comment from Alan Crowley, who says, thanks for keeping this forum alive, filled with wonderful panelists, guests, and chatterers. Best $5 today for sure. So Alan, we appreciate those remarks. We appreciate your super chat. And of course, Maria is in the chat as well. She has been making some excellent comments. She shared a quotation from Leonardo da Vinci that I would like to read out. Leonardo wrote, "Once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward, for there you have been, and there you will always long to return." And of course, you and Maria are both pilots. Do you experience those kinds of emotions when you fly?
Oh my God, flying is, it's so transcendent. I mean, I can't imagine what would happen if you yanked a caveman off the Paleolithic plains and stuck him in an airplane and took him for an aerobatic ride. I often wonder, sometimes people take their dogs flying or scuba diving and things like that. Like, do the animals even perceive that as reality? I've found with flying, I mean, there have been times when I've had my emotions just stirring and stewing, and I'm thinking like, okay, I'm gonna think about that while I'm flying. And I land the airplane and I'm like, oh man, I totally forgot to think about that because I was so just engaged with the wonder of flying. And was that my Maria, by the way?
Yes.
Thank you, baby. I'm with you on that. So yeah, it's really true. I mean, when you fly an airplane, when you transcend the ground, I imagine it's, like almost like Carl Sagan's 2D Apple, Apple in the 2D world example. It's like all of a sudden it's like another dimension that you get to experience. And myself and my wife also have had experience with aerobatic flying, where we're doing loops and rolls and spins in the sky, and experiencing that. I mean, it's something to like see a cloud in the sky, and then it's something to like say, I'm going to go fly up to that cloud, and then it's something else to be, I'm just going to fly up over the top of that cloud and look at it from above. And actually, you're not supposed to do that. It's industrial haze. It's not clouds, legally, I guess. But you really can start appreciating a three-dimensional perspective on the world. And I have very little experience scuba diving, but I would imagine that scuba divers probably experience a very similar experience. If you're diving through a wreck, I mean, it's probably as close to flying as you can get, short of having a wingsuit. Yeah, these perspectives are they're incredible and amazing, and it's important for us to have these. It's important for humans to go into space and see the little blue dot, the pale blue dot of the earth, and to have transcendent experiences that alter their consciousness and perception of things that help to break these barriers that we feel and limitations that we feel. And then also, I think, as Dear Moon Project intended to do, to imbue that into our artistic expression and creation, and share that with the rest of humanity, so that even those who haven't experienced these incredible realms can have just a little taste of the emotion and the inspiration and yearn for it themselves. So yeah, flying, if you haven't flown, it's quite an amazing experience. And, just as a caveman in an airplane, I mean, what a cool thing.
Indeed. And David Shoemaker points out in our internal chat that maybe the joy rides to space have the same emotion exhibited as flying. And he says the more people with a taste of space there are, the sooner the rest of us will get into space. David, would you like to elaborate on those comments?
Just quickly, and by the way, I don't have a pilot's license, but I've flown many a times in the right seat. But yeah, and I completely agree with you. And the reason I brought that up in the chat was I hear negative comments about billionaires going to space and $250,000 tickets, and it's such a waste of money. I think the more people that get that taste of space, the way I said that though, they too will look up and not say, gee, I wonder what that's like. They'll say, I remember when I was there, and they will tell other people, gee, I remember when that was there. And I think that's how we spread the positive image, because just a quick segue, negative emotions among humans seem to trump positive emotions. And I think there's a real challenge to develop these positive emotions that will be of significant magnitude to be able to put negative emotions aside for a while. Typical politicians, typical political parties manipulate emotions. They co-opt things that are in the popular culture, tie emotions around it to then point them to their fundraising and vote getting. So emotions work very effectively. I mean, they do that election cycle after election cycle. So I loved what you were talking about with flying, and I think that's what we need with space. The more people we get to space, people can see something bigger than what they possibly would do otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, David. And I'd actually have two things to say about the two different areas you brought up. One is, when people say, oh, life extension and these space flights, it's just the folly of billionaires. That may be true currently. At the same time, they're the ones who are spending the money to create this, and through economies of scale and technological advancements, all of these experiences will someday become available to all of us. But if you look at the amount of money in society that is spent on cosmetic surgery, that is spent on alcohol, I mean, multi-billion-dollar industry, the amount that's spent on entertainment, on distractions, on fashion, it's just incredible. And if these people are choosing to spend their money developing cutting edge technologies and amazing experiences and things that will inevitably benefit and save our lives, I'm thankful for it. Great, they can go experience it. You know what? They can also be the test pilots. So I'm not gonna be on the first ride. I'm a life extensionist. I'll wait until these things fly 100 times before I put myself onto it. And then secondarily, with the negative emotions, it's so true. I mean, it's just Maslow's hierarchy. The bottom of the pyramid it's just pure survival and having satiating or hunger and thirst and safety. So if we as humans, if you're out walking your dog at night and you see a silhouette of another dog or a human, you instinctively assume that creature is walking towards you. Even though it's a silhouette and you can't tell, you assume it's walking towards you. It's a lot safer to assume that than to not. So we definitely have a predisposition to like, oh, there's a rustle in the trees, I'm going to run away from it. I'm not going to go and explore and, oh, is there a grizzly bear there? Let's see what that is. And And if you want like the perfect example of it, and I do believe that, you know, both major political parties obviously exploit that to their fullest. Of course, the Transhumanist Party would never do that. So just look at the news before, you know, the past few election cycles. There was Al-Qaeda terrorists on the border, and maybe at the cycle after that, it's like Ebola's coming over the border, and you know, go look at the news cycles leading up to it, and the day after the election, the whole threat of Ebola disappears. The whole threat of Islamic terrorists sneaking over the border disappears. Like, where did all the news coverage go? What you can really get a sense of the amount of fear, especially that's geared towards either these people are stealing our resources and we want to, you know, prevent them from taking everything, to a flip side of the same thing, which is these people want our resources for free and they're not willing to do anything for it. And why should they get our resources when we're the ones working so hard for it? And the emotionalization of that to the unfortunate benefit of siloing us into, you know, according to our base emotions. So.
Yeah, so then our goal is to trigger the emotions that we want, that inspire them to go to space, to invest in life extension technologies, to look at positive ways to make the planet better. But I think that's a real challenge, but something that we all have to do.
Well, you know, it's funny because if you look at history in that context, like, we went to the moon. Why did we go to the moon? Do we go to the moon to really go there because it's hard and explore the moon? Like, no, we went there because the Russians launched Sputnik and they were getting ahead of us, and we felt threatened, and we wanted our ballistic missile technology to be better than the Russians' technology. And so we developed all that technology to get to the moon. So by Apollo 17, the American public had completely lost interest. It's like, I mean, even by Apollo, I don't know, it was 14, they couldn't even get a large TV audience to tune into the astronauts. The predicate for the space race was more based on the perception of threat by our earthly enemies than, wow, this amazing exploration and wonder. And it's unfortunate, but I think humans, you know, to a large extent, we want to be entertained. We want things that are obscene, are, you know, the funny meme, and often that's more important to us than really deep, meaningful change and growth. And that's why it's important for those of us, you know, who are certainly on this cast. It's important for us to plant that flag and keep going towards what we feel is actually important for everyone else, even if their motivation is to avoid threats and to be distracted and entertained. Because there's an unlimited universe of abundance and possibilities out there, and unless somebody's actually doing it proactively and positively, we're never going to enjoy those things in our life. And I really don't want to leave that to our great grandkids. I very selfishly want to get on some kind of starship and go explore the stars and see what the limits of physics allow us to do as an intelligent species.
Me too.
I'm right with you. There's my cryonics right there.
Yes, we should all want this kind of future for ourselves as individuals, not just for distant future humanity. We've had a lot of great comments in the chat. We've had a super chat from Celeste Castaldo, who says, "Good job." Thank you, Celeste. And she also says that she agrees with changing the culture to a more utopian future of longevity and abundance for all who choose it, and providing an emotional connection to that. She mentions there are studies on the benefits to health based on happiness. So if people can align their emotions with reality and with the positive aspects of reality in particular that could lead to at least a greater probability of healthy longevity. So thank you, Celeste, for that. And we've had great comments from Maria and Gary Abramson on the subject of flying. She says, flying changed the way I think and do everything in my life. I started flying to face my fear of flying. It was one of the most powerful journeys in my life. So thank you to Maria for relating that experience. By the way, I did post a link in the YouTube chat to our virtual Enlightenment Salon, where Maria was our special guest on February 28th, 2021. If you haven't seen that video, please, after this salon concludes, go and watch the virtual Enlightenment Salon with Maria, because she discusses a lot of her work there and a lot of what were some of the formative influences on her life and her ways of thinking. Maria works with the SENS Research Foundation, and she points out that $28 million were raised just in the past several weeks due to the Pulse chain airdrop. She says this is thanks to Richard Hart, the creator of the crypto coin Hex, and his airdrop participants. This will make a huge difference in our work and the advancement of therapies to cure aging. And Gary, you discussed blockchain technologies, as Maria pointed out. So what do you think could be some of the future connections between blockchain technologies and the pursuit of longevity? It seems that a lot of the same people are interested in both, and we've had entrepreneurs like Richard Hart, Vitalik Buterin, who have contributed significant resources to longevity research. How do you think that's going to develop in the coming years?
Yeah, it really remains to be seen. I think the biggest opportunity in that is a democratization of where we put our resources, and it's not just money, but also through some blockchain projects. I know there's also I think VitaCoin and some other blockchain projects that are intended to create more abundant, more equally distributed resources. Will allow others to contribute time, energy, expertise, and whatnot. So on the one hand, the blockchain in itself is a distributed database and can allow access to all the information within that database to whoever is participating. So there's an enormous siloing of information just within biotech, especially. There's just so many companies that are doing the same research in their labs. It's proprietary information. They're not sharing it with each other. It's precluding the rate of advancement that we could actually be experiencing. And by having things that are democratized, and especially with DAOs, things that are decentralized, allowing all of humanity to contribute to and utilize the knowledge that we're producing through experimentation and research, I think there's a huge opportunity to advance technology, and also to, instead of hoarding some of the resources and putting scarcity models behind them to maximize profits, that very often, like treatments, think of a treatment versus a cure. Well, a treatment's a hell of a lot more profitable often than a cure, because you can keep someone, who's diabetic on something for their whole life. Well, imagine you take a pill and you're not diabetic anymore. Now you don't need insulin. Like, what does that look like for all the industries built around that? So I think blockchain goes a long way towards a construct that can democratize resources, both in the discovery state and the utilization state. And in that way, I really salute those who are in the blockchain world who are doing so much. Especially, it's really incredible what Richard Hart did with the pulse chain airdrop. It was by far the largest crypto donation event in the history of cryptocurrency thus far. Hopefully it'll be eclipsed by what is yet to come, but it's a harbinger of possibilities, and I really look forward to where we can go with it.
Yes, indeed, and hopefully this pulse chain airdrop can provide inspiration for the future of longevity research and advocacy, that people know that this was done, something on this scale was achieved. And as you said, this could be a prelude to what is to come. Also, I am quite fond myself of the decentralized sharing of information, especially in a scientific context where knowledge is not supposed to be siloed. It is supposed to be commonly available to facilitate the progress of humankind. And you mentioned information silos before. Daniel Twett even characterized it as information feudalism, where different people have access perhaps to different pieces of information, and sometimes it could be all valid information, but incomplete information that different individuals have different components of. And so people create mental models around that information. And sometimes those mental models can begin to greatly diverge. Whereas if we had more of a common stock of information that everybody could readily access, that could reduce the siloing. But of course, the internet is a vast place, and you can find a lot of facts on the internet. Indeed, many more facts are there available at the click of a mouse than people agree are correct. So how do we break down the silos? How do we get people, one, to have access to better information, and two, to make much better use of the information that is already here?
Well, I think there's that's a great question. I think there are some things that we're doing to that extent already. One of the biggest is Wikipedia, where there's just a distillation of information that's agreed upon, and people really fight for what is what the truth is. And I find it kind of ironic that I know that there are people who have articles about them on Wikipedia where they're quotes they never made, and then they try to get them reversed on Wikipedia. It's like, I never said that. And the stance of Wikipedia is, well, you need a credible source to show that you didn't say it, because this other credible source said that you did say that. So even within that, there's a challenge. But Wikipedia is an amazing start. I think back to Elon Musk, Starlink is just an amazing project. It will create high bandwidth access to the internet and all the knowledge on it, throughout the world. And eventually there'll probably be a Starlink constellation around the moon and around Mars. I don't know what people are going to use all that bandwidth for. Probably a lot of the entertainment aspects that they use currently. Maybe that can be throttled, but I think we're creating some gateways to opening knowledge. There's definitely a lot of knowledge that's being opened just educationally with things like Khan Academy and a lot of the educational resources available on the internet. You could probably learn the equivalent of a PhD in almost any subject free, just by finding the right YouTube channels and the right educational resources. So it's a matter of will to a large extent. And I think that, whenever you have anything that's not empirical, you have to be willing to take a step back and say, where is this coming from? Where is the bias? What's the interpretation of this? What's generating that bias? And that really gets back to first principles thinking, which is literally to strip away biases, strip away habits in all areas. So I think through Wikipedia, through Starlink, through first principles thinking, through ubiquitous educational resources, we have the opportunity to transcend that. Some people will, some people won't. And that's just the way it is. And that's where ultimately, whether you think it's true or not, Darwin will poke his head up, and those of us who take advantage of the resources available to us will likely enjoy a better reality than a lot of people who choose to remain entertained or locked into ways of thinking that are habitual and not informed by the best information currently available.
Yes, indeed. And this is why I highly encourage lifelong learning. As you pointed out, there's such an abundance of information. People really can educate themselves in any of a variety of disciplines if they so choose, if they devote the time to it and they have the discernment to figure out what information is accurate and reliable and helpful to their development. Also, along the lines of Starlink and inspiring awe, I did witness a procession of Starlink satellites at night over northern Nevada several months ago as I was running and I was returning home. And I saw essentially this line of lights. They looked like stars in the sky, except they were moving much more rapidly than stars. And in a coordinated fashion, they were maintaining their distances from one another. And there were just a few out of alignment, but even the ones that were out of alignment, they maintained a constant distance of separation from the ones that were in alignment. And I had never seen a phenomenon like that before. I was inspired to record a very blurry video of the procession. And then I went on Facebook and I instantly queried people, oh, what in the world could this be? And very quickly, people, including David Shoemaker, identified this as a Starlink procession, but it was truly a novel phenomenon, not something that one expected to see in the night sky until it was actually achieved. So hire some awe in certain individuals.
We lost Gennardi there for a minute, but maybe he's back. All
I
I
think
wanted
we
to say was
should...
that as far as inspiring people, as Gennardi was inspired, I've got an app for tracking the ISS and an app for tracking the Starlink satellites and so forth. And I'm one of those people out walking my dog at midnight, except I'm looking up and I'm going, that's Jupiter. Oh, that's Mars, or that's Venus.
Yes.
And the crazy neighbors come out and they wonder, what's this guy looking up at the sky for? And that makes a great midnight discussion while you're out walking your dog. Completely irrelevant to anything else we're talking about today, but totally fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, something also incredible with Starlink is when they release the Starlink satellites, they spin the upper stage of the Falcon rocket, and that imparts a slightly different angular momentum to each of the Starlink satellites. So even though they're a line in the sky, just that momentum along with their ion thrusters will cause them to disperse and their orbits to become more polar. So it's really amazing. I can't imagine what would the ancient Romans or Greeks have thought of a Starlink formation. I'm sure they would have had all kinds of divine explanations for it. It's probably what it looked like when the Hale-Bopp comet was crashing or not Hale-Bopp, it was the Shoemaker-Levy comet that was crashing into Jupiter as like a string of satellites. So I'm just hoping that everything's going up instead of coming down. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So hopefully I'm back now. Apologies for the interruption. I would suggest that we go to some other questions from USTP panelists. Let's start with Art Ramon Garcia. What would you like to ask Gary?
Yeah, I've had the experience of flying on an ultralight. So
Mm.
yeah, talk about exhilarating and scary at the same time. So yeah, I kind of have a question on super soldiers. I recently read an article how the U.S. government was giving soldiers some sort of longevity treatment because to extend their usefulness. They don't break apart, get injuries, and it seems like the U.S. government has no problem funding transhumanist technology when it comes to the military. But when it comes to even suggesting that for the populace, you don't hear anything about that. So I'm hoping that one day in the future, like say 2030, the Chinese government says, hey, we're going to give every single newborn after 2030 free treatment to be a super hyper intelligent, a human, and hopefully maybe that could stimulate the U.S. to share some of the transhumanist technology with average person here. So what do you think? What's it going to take for some mindsets to change here? Anything like that?
Well, I mean, that's a great point, and that also goes back to the Apollo program. I think if there was a news report that the Chinese are genetically enhancing the intelligence of all of their new babies, and they're going to surpass Americans by a wide margin and take over, all of the higher learning of the world, you might see an uprising within the American populace. Well, like, we want these technologies too. I think after the Gulf, the Deepwater Horizon disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, if I have my timing right, there was a huge movement to get away from this offshore drilling, especially going so deep and with the precarious nature of the technologies involved. And at some point there was I recall there being news reports that, I don't know if it was that the Russians or the Cubans were going to sideways drill into the oil fields under the Gulf of Mexico and take all the oil. And it was like a rallying, American citizens to well, the hell with all the risks. Let's get that oil before, the Russians do. So it's just, again, appealing to our base instincts. And it's also the government's interest to a large extent is in controlling the people that it governs. If it was not controllable on the face of it, there'd be anarchy. There wouldn't be social order. There would be no opportunity to do things collectively that benefit us all. But on the flip side of it, there's an exertion of absolute power power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely, like those in power are going to use everything available in society to exert more power and more control. And a lot of people also, I think, they have an idea that government is evil or government is the answer. Government's totally abstract. Government only is the people who are in it. I would imagine that from the Transhumanist Party perspective, if the entire government was filled with transhumanists instead of Republicans and Democrats, we would all feel like, hey, this is great. We're really moving to the future. We're doing good things collectively. And it's not that anything in government is different except the people who are making the decisions. So where I think we can, as a society, overcome that, Ramon, is literally to have people outside of government, outside of anything that is strongly controlled, creating possibilities of a future that is so optimistic and so awe-inspiring that people gravitate towards it. And when people want something, that desire translates to votes. And politicians would be, if a politician today came out and said, we're going to get rid of all video entertainment. We're eliminating television, movies, reality programming, and YouTube. They would be pretty unpopular. So, in creating these amazing possibilities of the future, it will, in a sense, wag the dog. It'll wag the tail will wag the dog of the politicians and I think they'll bend towards the better future.
Yes, very interesting remarks, and I agree. We need outside influences outside the system in order to change the system or inspire the system to change. We have a comment from Luis Arroyo along these lines, who says transhumanism and war should never mix, but it's no surprise that the US government creates new weapons of war instead of improving society. And yes, within the current two-party system, that seems to be the set of motivations, and hopefully transhumanists, through the influence that we can exert on the political system, can change some of those incentives, some of those ways of thinking, so that human enhancement will be used for productive, constructive purposes, not destructive purposes. So now let us go to Ben Ballweg. Ben, what question do you have for Gary?
Hi, Gary. Thanks for the talk today. I wonder, as we're trying to inspire people past the deathist ideology, where do we even start? I guess I'm reminded of a professor that I had that had said that the data don't speak for themselves, that we gotta translate that data to them. I'm thinking of Sinclair and Scott, and I'm sorry, forgetting the third author from the last month or so, that we're talking about, like, if we invest in longevity science, that there's trillions in dollars in savings. And how do we translate that enormous economic benefit to people? Or I don't want to be putting words in your mouth, or do we just got to sell them on, we want to live as long as possible, right? And this is the way to do that. How do we go about selling this?
You know, that's a great question, Ben, and something I think about a lot. As an advocate for radical life extension and cryonics and whatnot, and transhumanism, I part of me thinks that a focus on the optimistic possibilities of it. Imagine making people aware of the suffering that can be alleviated through these technologies, the suffering that people are already alleviating. I mean, imagine a world without morphine and anesthetics. Invite anyone to go the rest of their life without any anesthetics. If you need surgery, you need your teeth filled, whatever, just don't have anesthetics. You don't need to alleviate the pain. It's fine experiencing it. It's part of life. I think there's opportunities to guide people towards obvious benefits of technology, but at the same time, I think the most important thing is in the doing. It's in the Elon Musks. It is, we have wanted so long to rejuvenate. I mean, Fountain of Youth, and I've seen so many snake oil salesmen in the longevity field. And the day we take an old mouse and literally, not a progeric mouse, but an old mouse, and literally totally rejuvenate it into a young mouse, and then do that again and again, and that mouse that would normally live 18 months or whatnot is alive 10 years later, we're all going to want that. And it doesn't matter, we're selling a lot of possibilities and a lot of prospects. And when we're selling realities, if we're just quietly working in the background, as much as we're trying to bend society in order to direct resources towards creating those realities and eliminate social obstacles to creating those realities, when the first human actually has a successful rejuvenation treatment, there's going to be a whole chain of people who want that. And when everyone's getting that, probably even people who are wild skeptics and wildly against it are going to find some rationale why they can change their belief system and like, oh, actually that is a good idea. That is consistent with my religion. That is consistent with my philosophy. That is consistent with my culture. That's what God meant by I will help those who help themselves. We helped ourselves through rejuvenation biotechnology, so now we will rejuvenate ourselves. So just doing, it really, there's a great saying from Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, I believe it's, your actions speak so loudly, I cannot hear what you say. And if we, by our actions, actually methodically and stubbornly create this better reality, everyone's going to hear us. It doesn't matter what our arguments for and against are. And they're going, when they see how wondrous the world is and how abundant it is, I really believe people are going to want it. And the people who don't are just Darwinistically not going to participate in that future. And they won't be part of the human future anyway. So it's not an endless obstacle to overcome in that sense as well.
Yes, we have some great feedback on this in our YouTube chat. John H. says, yes, that would change everything. A spectacular success that can't be ignored, like rejuvenating an old mouse to a biologically young mouse. Alexandria points out that suffering seems more profitable to those without vision. So perhaps if an advance arrives that makes it clear that the potential for biological age reversal is there, then that vision would be created, and perhaps some people would turn away from the defeatist narrative of the inevitability of aging.
There's actually another really great point, which is that I think a lot of people's fear of these transcendent technologies is it's not just like, is this right or wrong? That's how they're rationalizing it. But at a very deep level, there's a fear of like, will I get to participate? Will this technology allow people who get it before me to be so competitive that, I'm not competitive at a survival level anymore? There's also a great misperception, and I don't know where the hell it comes from, that, we're going to have life extension. I'm going to be in my 90-year-old decrepit, paralyzed body for the next 200 years. And they don't see it as, we're talking about rejuvenation. We're talking about being in a 25-year-old body just for now, and eventually, and re-engineering that body to be better than any human could ever have been. And yes, you will be able to participate in it. You will be able to experience the abundance and the health and all the experiences that will afford. And that actually brings up a previous point that I made, which is, to be quite honest, I think that an enormous percentage of humanity is living life just waiting to get through it. Life is a struggle. Life sucks. There's grief and loss and death and struggle and jealousy and all the negative emotions, and they're dealing with it. A lot of people have self-loathing, self-hatred, fear. And to say, let's extend that forever is terrifying. I mean, there are probably people who, there's a large number of people, it's like death will be a welcome relief from all of the struggle of life. And even people who, want to, who rationally want to have life extension and want to have this technological advancement, sometimes, if they're not making advancements to love themselves and be comfortable with themselves and happy, they see that as extending this base level of discomfort. And if their psyche is couched in a survival mindset of, this trauma is equated to survival, and therefore I must always be married to an alcoholic, or I must always, self-destruct in this way, unless people work on themselves, the future that they envision is a continuation of that. That's what survival equates to. So why would they want to perpetuate that forever? So I think, there really is a lot of work that needs to be done in connecting to a love of life and a love of self, because if you don't love life, why the hell would you want to extend it? And if you do love life, why the hell would you want it to be any shorter? I mean, if life is an amazing experience and awe-inspiring and just constant learning and growth and experiences, like, you know, a billion years isn't enough, because there's an infinite universe out there, at least as far as we know. So.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I have always my entire life seen essentially inexhaustible possibilities for what one could do, what one could experience, what one could enjoy. And I would always see the end of that as the greatest possible tragedy. As you pointed out, unfortunately, not all people perceive it this way. Luis Arroyo has the view that most young people think life, quote, sucks and we have no future due to global warming. And therefore, as you were saying, Gary, for them, death seems to be an escape. And it's such a tragedy that these are young people, but to some extent, they've been brainwashed by this defeatist climate narrative. On the one hand, yes, climate change is a real problem. On the other hand, they seem to be blind to technological possibilities for overcoming it, which is one of the areas that we discuss within the Transhumanist Party at some frequency. And instead of seeing this as a grand challenge for humanity to overcome, a lot of people unfortunately fall into defeatist kind of thinking. And I think the culture here and the messaging from politicians and the media really lead particularly impressionable young people astray. How can we reverse that?
Well, I mean, I think it starts with a realization that humans are just not important. We're just not. We could detonate every single nuclear weapon that we have and completely annihilate humanity from the world. The chances of us actually eliminating life from this planet is zero. There is life a kilometer under the ice in Antarctica. There's life surrounding, 400 degrees Celsius volcanic vents at the bottom of the ocean and in geysers at Yellowstone. And then there's tardigrades, of course. So you come back to Earth in 200 million years, 300 million years, and there may be all different forms of intelligent life. So in that sense, we have a gift. I mean, we have a real gift that we are, as technologically advanced as we are, as self-aware as we are, that we're at a state now where we can hyper-evolve ourselves. We can control, we're just on the verge of controlling our own genetics and engineering ourselves at a biological and synthetic level. So, it is true that there's a loss of hope when you look at our leadership, because from basically any party and almost everyone in power, bar very, very few, it's like following a football team that it's constantly throwing interceptions, and it's like we're just failing in the game, and it's demoralizing. And if you're trying to follow a team and that team is just losing through stupid errors, not playing together like a team all the time, it's really challenging and you become demoralized. So there is an enormous amount of opportunities. I mean, obviously, Peter Diamandis' whole approach of abundance. And I mean, just for starters, if we were to utilize the great nuclear fusion reactor of the sun and put enormous amounts of solar power to desalinize the ocean and create enormous forests in the Sahara Desert, we would pull huge amounts of carbon out of the atmosphere while increasing the salinity of the oceans, which we're decreasing by melting all the glaciers. That'll create more oxygen, it'll create more natural life. The truth and the opportunity and the sad thing all at once is it's all a decision. It's all a decision of humanity. If you look at World War II, and you look at where the United States especially and the world was technologically in 1941 versus 1945, in that tiny period where we focused all of our efforts in a unified fashion, even though it took, Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan and all that to do it. We created the advances in aviation, the advances in aerospace that allowed us to have the Apollo program. We had floating ports. We had the manufacturing capacity of the United States, which what allowed it to eclipse Europe for many years, which was smashed by World War II, and the fact that our film industry survived, which allowed the United States to become the center of global culture in Hollywood. What we did in that 4-year period is mind-bending, and developing nuclear weapons from just theory. So if we put our minds to it, the capacities that we have within us are literally astounding. And the future we could create if we chose to are astounding. And that's why I really think that at a deep, even subconscious but overt level, that's what Elon Musk is working on. And I've been watching Boca Chica, where they're building Starship, from when they were building the Starhopper, and they were, doing the first tests of the Raptor engine, which is an incredible achievement in the chemical propulsion. And his whole motivation for that is, we need to create the inspiration for humanity to go after these things. We need to put a base on Mars, not just to do it, but because the new generation who's dissuaded by we're just destroying the world is going to see, like, damn, we're actually creating these incredible technologies. Like, these aren't limitations. All these people, half the people in government who are dictating the regulations that put constructs on, or constraints rather, on our technologies, they have no clue what these technologies are. They're internet illiterate, they're computer illiterate, they're coding illiterate, technologically illiterate. But when you have, things being created in the real world that are beyond what these people can even conceive, I feel like it creates such a sense of optimism, and that optimism will translate into electoral awareness and interest, especially in things like the Transhumanist Party, that will embrace these kinds of technologies. And eventually, hopefully, so long as votes are actually really counted, which, by the way, blockchain would be a great system to transfer into voting, because it's, completely unalterable chain of data. But that will empower the future. So in a sense, the innovation and the future will empower itself. And hopefully all of these, the politicians and people who've stood in the way of that, just to guard their own silo and their own acquisitive, hoard of goods, will be overwhelmed by the abundance from without, and the inspiration and motivation that will hopefully translate into governance that empowers it. So.
Yes, indeed. And I hope that kind of inspiration can be found. I hope it can be found soon. And there are places where one can look for it. Maria Intrigus Abramson in our YouTube chat points to developing the COVID-19 vaccine as one such example. Also, I think it would be great to have a 4-year transhumanist push for acceleration of technology, analogous to the kind of technological development that occurred during World War II, as you described it. If we had a situation where in the course of 4 years, massive amounts of resources, great minds could be dedicated toward overcoming the greatest problems of the human condition, first and foremost among them, biological aging, how far along would we be? It would be incredible, I think. So let's hope we can reach that politically where enough people, enough politicians, enough institutions can be brought to agree that this is worthwhile and worth dedicating resources toward. Maria also writes in the chat, curing aging is about health. Nobody questions health is extremely important. People will fight you when you tell them you want to extend life radically. They fear that and think it is unethical, but health, nobody wants to get sick. Then when people feel healthy, young and strong into their 70s, they will understand life extension. Luis Arroyo comments on this, that health span extension is life extension. And indeed, those two are inextricable. Healthy people don't just drop dead for no reason, and people who are biologically frail are not able to continue living for that long after reaching a state of frailty. Now, how do you think we can get people to connect health and longevity? Because sometimes it seems people have siloed the two, and they say things like, well, it's not length of life that matters, it's quality of life. It almost seems like they would be content with living to the age of 60 and really, really good health and then dropping dead for no reason, but they don't understand that that's really biologically not possible. So how can we break through to them that lifespan and health span really are inextricably connected? You could say they're one and the same even.
Yeah, I actually, something that brings to mind for me is Theodore Roosevelt. For any of us who've looked at his life, that is a man who lived so fully. I mean, every moment was pure action, aside from being a president, and then he was starting his own progressive party, and then all the things that he pushed for and experienced in his life. He died at 60 years old. He died at 60. So would it be great to have a life that was like that full and abundant if you had to trade it for longevity? Living to 80, maybe. Living to 1,000, probably not. I think the reality is, and where my mind is currently, is to kind of let the argument go, just let it go. If people want to argue about, is it better to live, a really empowered short life or a long life? It's kind of like, who cares? Because you're going to live as long as you're going to live. And if we focus more on just living a good life and a fun life, a fulfilling life, a joyous life, a healthy life, a rewarding life, a growthful life, then you're still going to live as long as you're going to live. I mean, you could ultimately always, turn off the switch, either put a gun to your head, or at some point, if you're a digital construct, just say, let's stop running the program. But by virtue of focusing on health span, by virtue of people just feeling better in the lives that they're leading, in the possibilities of those lives, and feeling better about themselves, and like, I love myself, I love my life, I want this to keep going on, we don't have to worry about the longevity question, because I think that'll really take care of itself. It's like if you ask someone, like, hey, you need to walk from Los Angeles to New York, or you need to travel from Los Angeles to New York. Here's a horse, go ahead and do it. And then he said, well, if you wanted to, you could hop on this airplane and you could be there in a few hours. But if you want to take the horse, you can take the horse. Maybe there's some urgency behind it. I think most people would rather not face the elements on a horse and hop on an airplane. So when the reality of longevity is there, it's not an existential question anymore. Then it's really a choice. And I think because we have this base survival instinct, because we are so emotionally grounded in trying to survive, those of us who enjoy our lives and who have the opportunity to will choose life over death. They'll choose vitality over infirmity, and they'll choose youthfulness over being senile and aged. And if somebody really in the world of technological, if you could go into a CVS pharmacy and get rejuvenated, and you're like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'd rather go buy some alcohol and get drunk or whatever. Have at it. That's fine. We have free will. You have free agency. It's really not our problem. I only to the extent that we can create political will towards dedicating social resources towards creating these technologies, or remove barriers to them. I mean, there is a legitimate regulatory regime that is sensible. If there was zero regulation, I challenge you. I have a copy of a 1902 Sears catalog here. And if you read through the products that they're selling in that Sears catalog, you will literally be like, holy crap, they actually could sell arsenic as a skin rejuvenation treatment. It has like the magic ghost in it. Aside from the fact that it totally replaces phosphorus in your DNA and kills you. This 1902 Sears catalog is filled with these things. So there is a necessary regulatory regime, but to the extent that we can take the regulations and institutionalized barriers that prevent the development of new technologies only to allow entrenched interests to maintain their power and profit motives, and how that is impacted by the way we engage other people and change their minds. I am of the opinion of, if somebody really wants to argue about, oh man, life extension's bad or rejuvenation's, that's not right. Okay, have at it. I would love to see how you change your mind when you can literally walk into Walgreens or CVS and get a treatment that rejuvenates you. You want to sign this declaration that you're going to be prohibited from receiving that. Now, you can put your signature where your advocacy is. Creating the reality will by virtue create a reality where those who want it will get it, those who don't want it won't get it, and when it's available, it won't be an existential question. It won't be a theoretical question. I think you'll see a lot more people wanting and getting what we're fighting for now.
Yes, indeed. The availability of certain advances definitely affects people's propensity to pursue them. I think a lot of people would not hesitate to get a life-saving open heart surgery if they needed one. But when it was a mere theoretical prospect in the mid-20th century, it did stir some controversy at the time. So it is indeed the case that when faced with a real world choice rather than an abstract question, people tend to make more life-affirming decisions when a lot is at stake. Now, I would like to go to Jason Geringer for his question.
First of all, you've said all kinds of cool stuff. It's really encouraging because, we talk about, how can we, promote transhumanism and all that. And that's good news, what you're saying there. And I agree, we probably won't have to sell them too hard because, well, you've said it already. And, back when we mentioned something about Star Trek and, that there's this idyllic future that, a lot of people want, or something like that. I mean, I know people on both sides of the spectrum, both conservative and liberal, that, want that to happen. But, then I look at them, I think to myself, if your political party, if they had their way, we would never get there. You know what I mean? So that's part of the reason why I, joined the USTP, because, and then the other thing, when you was talking about blockchain, we have this social dilemma where, there's the algorithm of, if you've seen that documentary. But what I'm wondering is, I'm hoping that there will possibly one day be a way to use blockchain and possibly make it into an NFT or something like that. I don't know all the ins and outs, so that's why I'm wondering if we could make some sort of NFT of your personal data, and that everything would still exist at the same. Facebook would still sell your data or whatever, but at least you get something out of it. You know what I mean? I don't know if that kind of data is able to be made into some kind of NFT on a blockchain. If so, then we could leverage our, data as groups. I'm just concerned about the whole social dilemma where, there's the profit motive in trying to make society crazy. And, so looking for a transhumanist type of solution to all that is what I'm thinking. I was wondering if you think there's any possibility we might figure that out one day.
Well, that's a great point, Jason, and something worth really considering. And, for sure, the totality of the data that we're generating is probably inconceivable. And it is for several reasons. First of all, we have our base data. It could be, what did I buy? What's the temperature setting of my thermostat? This thing's reading my heart rate variability. So, there's that base data. Then there's that data in relationship to your behaviors. What are the trends in my heart rate variability? What are the trends in my thermostat settings? The trends in what I'm buying or consuming in media. So, and then there's a data set that is in the context of society. How do my data trends, are they in relationship to other people's? And that in itself is a data set. And there's literally an almost unlimited amount of data mining, and that data mining is creating enormous amounts of data that it's hard for us to rationalize it. But at the same time, eventually AI systems will be able to, especially quantum computers and whatnot, may be able to look at a inconceivably, incomprehensibly large set of data and then see relationships and see patterns and see opportunities to create value from that data. So, as far as how can we have agency and ownership with blockchain, to some extent, it may be impossible because there's so many levels of data that the data within a blockchain relative to the data, and that has all your data relative to a blockchain that has different data sets is itself a data stream. So it can be endless. There's, there will ultimately be probably a significant loss of individuality and privacy. When you get to Neuralink, when you get to things where you have a high bandwidth direct interface with digital constructs, and maybe you've got Amazon or Google or whatever, and they can just go right into your life experiences and emotions and whatnot. And we can relate to each other in more holistic and total ways of being able to literally bridge our minds. There's a question of, is our data part of us as individuals or part of the universe? Is our data, is the value of our data that is mined in the context of other people, is there an intellectual property in that, or can that actually be useful to develop technologies and opportunities that we can take advantage of? So, there's a lot of philosophical debate and ethical and moral debate around that. There certainly is the challenge of a loss of our individuality, of our self-identity, of our privacy, as things become more digitized. Can NFTs and blockchain help create barriers and help, maybe ultimately, you won't be Jason Geringer, you will be the algorithm known as Jason Geringer, and that will dictate the whole cloud of data and interactions, that are you. And that will be the extent of your individuality. And even with that, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about that is really uncomfortable for a lot of people to look at as a possible future, and why I think a lot of people are like, damn, man, I don't want that future.
Yes.
And exactly why Star Trek has the appeal. Because guess what? We're all biological, all anthropomorphic. We're all going to be us, just as I am, one copy of me, despite transporter technology, one copy of me. And I'm going to, no threat to my self-identity, to my privacy, to my agency. So, this technology and where it takes us is it's going to create a lot of opportunities and interesting debates. But the reality is that unless we destroy ourselves through the great filter, we are going to develop these technologies. We're going there. And the only question that we really have to contend with is, do we, us in this panel and those of us, anyone watching this video, do you get to be a part of it? Because if we don't destroy ourselves, and even if we try to destroy ourselves at some point and technology rebounds, we will enter a technological era of incredible transhumanistic, digital constructs that are beyond anything we can conceive of in our current experience through our limited sensory perception of our evolved biological bodies. So that's just I think that's just the reality of things.
Sounds good.
Indeed, we have an abundance of technological potential to look forward to, and it definitely raises a lot of questions. You mentioned issues of identity, and we've discussed those on prior virtual enlightenment salons as well. I'm the kind of person who wouldn't step through Star Trek transporter or anything that would disassemble my body molecule by molecule, but I will accept incremental alterations and improvements, including artificial ones that integrate with my biological system and give me new capabilities. But I think there will be a great spectrum of comfort levels that different people will have with these different future technologies. And this will be a contributing factor to the immense diversity of future beings that we discussed. Now let us go to Alexandria Black. Alexandria, what question do you have for Gary?
Oh, first, I just want to say a thing or two. Gary, you are an amazing artist, and I wish all relationships could be as strong as your marriage. But what I want to get to now is, are you familiar with Daniel Schmachtenberger's series called The War on Sense Making? Because no matter how much sense we make here, there are still forces at play that have captured just about all the pillars of society, including the press, and these could be our obstacles.
Yeah, I honestly am not familiar with his work, but I think that's a great point, Alexandria, and it's probably one of the biggest challenges to overcome, especially as we become more siloed, especially as our reality is becoming more augmented and eventually virtual, and we literally start at some point losing the ability to discern what's real and what's not. Maybe we've all seen examples of, I think they had one with Obama where they used an AI audio technology to model his language, and they have him saying things that he didn't say with video that it looks like he's saying it. 5 or 10 years from now, you're not going to be able to believe your lying eyes, because the things that will be presented to us in our perception of reality may or may not be real. So, that is a really existential challenge for humanity. And how we overcome it is a great challenge as well. I think part of it is having connection, like, what we're doing today, and having, the Transhumanist Party that is willing to fight and advocate for having responsible development and integration of these technologies, and in a mindful way that doesn't allow the exploitation of it. I would imagine, every technology that there's ever been has been exploited by whoever had the technology to some extent. At some point, some human will become the first augmented intellectual human. At that moment, they may be smarter than any human who ever lived, and they may have a choice of, okay, I'm like 1,000 times smarter than Einstein. Should I just use that to rule the world, or should I invite everyone else into this opportunity? Whoever first figured out they could chip a piece of obsidian and make a blade could certainly defeat all their other enemies. Am I going to use this and keep the water hole for myself, or am I going to let all my buddies know, hey, guess what? We can all do this, and together we can defend it from the neighboring tribe. So I think it goes back to my point that humans really aren't important. We're self-important, but we don't have to be here. We don't, it's fortunate that we are. And there's as much a possibility that we can destroy ourselves as any asteroid or any natural phenomenon. And I think that the best chance against that is just to engage with each other and communicate with each other, and try to have political activism, and try to build a community, spread our ideas, use and exploit the media that are developed for any other purposes for our purposes. And literally there's not much more that we can do than that, because anything beyond that it's aspirational. It's not real world. And I also, I know it seems like the change without emanates from the change within, but the more that we can learn to be at peace and loving ourselves, who we are, our most authentic selves, and we can radiate that out to the world, be the, I think it's like, be the, as Taoist, be the sun, and what is in you will warm the earth. And we can let other people be more relaxed, more vulnerable, more comfortable, more joyful in their lives. They will be more open to and more empathetic to where we're coming from, and the possibilities of the future, and much more open to extending their lives and being willing to partake in it. There's no amount of two people sitting in a room debating, possibilities that will actually create those possibilities in the real world. It's a matter of, also to wherever you can in the world, wherever you can manifest in reality, through creation, through art, through business, through politics, commerce, communication, product development, design, anything where you can actually manifest some expression of your values and your beliefs and your optimistic hopes for the future. That is the best that we can do. And hopefully there's big enough rudder that it will turn the Titanic before we hit any icebergs. And, but I'm out there turning the rudder, so.
Yes, indeed. That was an excellent and eloquent analysis. Thank you very much, Gary. And I think we've come to the point in our salon where we will have concluding remarks from our panelists, and then, as is our custom, we will give you the last words. So I want to go around to each of the participants one last time and hear from them any of their final observations regarding this conversation. And let's see if Jose Cordero is able to share a few words with us.
Yes, I have been listening to all of this, but going to bed in Madrid, and I really enjoyed the discussion. So my congratulations to Gary and to Gennady for organizing this session. So it is really fantastic to see all my friends, my transhumanist friends from different parts of the world. And my best wishes to you, Gary, to your fantastic wife, my sister, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you. Mi hermano.
Excellent. Well, thank you to Jose for those great words. And now let's go to Art Ramon Garcia.
Yeah, no additional questions. Thanks for coming on the show. Very informative. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to Art Ramon. And now let us go to David Shoemaker.
Yes, I echo the sentiments of an excellent session. It seems like I come across many people that are not moved by logic. And I remember, the saying that you can't use logic to change a belief that was not created with logic. I don't know if that's true, but it seems to be true in my circumstance. So it needs to be emotional. It needs to be, people buy on emotion and then turn around and justify what they bought, giving you all kinds of logical arguments for their emotion. So you seem to be very good at it. So my point is that I want your phone number. I want to put you on speed dial when I get into the next one of these. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you so much for coming. You are eloquent, as Gennady said, and I really appreciate being here today.
Thank you, David.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for those good words, David. And now let us go to Ben Ballweg.
I think I'd follow up with David's comment about how to get to people's emotions. And I like your Saint-Exupéry, if I'm pronouncing that right, his quote about you got to not show them how to steer the boat, etc., but motivate them to want to search the seas. And reading through my notes, I saw about, you had mentioned about blockchain will maybe reduce the profit motive. And I just listened to a TED Talk in the last day about maybe creating a fiat currency for stimulating green technologies and such. And got me thinking similar way of maybe to stimulate longevity and future technologies through fiat currency or something like that. But sorry, no further question for you, but thanks for your time today, Gary.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, thank you to Ben. And now let us go to Jason Geringer.
This is pretty cool. I thought we was going to talk mostly about your moonburn thing, which I think is really cool going on. Incidentally, sometimes I'll like type into Google, super cool picture of whatever, right? Just to see what comes up and look at stuff. And I've seen some of your stuff that comes up in that search. And so you're pretty good. So, I just thought that was a little weird. I'll just pass it back to you. Yeah.
All right.
Man.
All right. Well, thank you, Jason. And indeed, I will post a link in the YouTube chat to Moonburn Creative, which is Gary's company. And Gary, when it comes time to provide your concluding remarks, please feel free to say a few words about Moonburn. But now let's go to Alexandria for her concluding remarks.
Just thanks so much. It was good to finally meet you too. I met Maria, was it February?
Okay.
Yes,
you guys rock.
She's my better 4/5, but thank you.
And indeed, once again, please to our audience, go watch the Virtual Enlightenment Salon with Maria and Gary Abramson. If you have not seen that, that video is a real treat. There's even a musical performance at the end. So I think everyone will quite enjoy it. But now, Gary, the time has come for you to give us your final remarks. What would you like to say about this conversation? Anything that hasn't been mentioned yet, or any insights that you would like to draw from it?
Yes. I'll be brief. First of all, I'll just say Moonburn Creative is my bread and butter. It's my day job. I really enjoy doing branding and creative consulting and interactive development, especially in the realm of cutting edge technologies and empowering those. And I'm very honored to have some of the clients that I have in that realm. And I hope to be able to empower them to bring a better future to all of us. As far as the discussion, I think this is, I really appreciate you inviting me to this. I think the work that the Transhumanist Party is doing is very important. And, you know, at some point, whether humanity realizes it or not, we are all going to be transhumanists, at least those of us that go into the future. And as I always say, anyone who's got a filling in their mouth or a pacemaker or whatnot, you're already a transhumanist. And really, if you engage with the internet in any way and use a mind that's beyond your mind, you're also tapping into transhumanism. I think what David alluded to is absolutely spot on. We live in a world of emotions, which was the underpinning of my presentation. And we make pretty much all of our decisions emotionally first, and then we use the power of our mind to rationalize why we're going to do what we want to do anyway. And, you know, as far as getting to a better future, I imagine if we're in a forest and there's a big cake on the other side of the trees, and in between the cake and us is a tiger. We're going to connect with that fear, and we're not going to go and get the cake. You really shouldn't be eating cake anyway, probably, unless it's ketogenic. But we're consumed by that fear. And there's some of us that are going to figure out how can we take the trees around us and make a wall and make a bridge and get to the cake and avoid the tiger. And there's some of us who are just going to look at that tiger and be like, I can't have that. It's not worth it. The future will be what we make of it. It will be what we choose to have. And I think I'll reiterate, a big part of that is people learning to love the lives they already have. And to the extent that we can help those around us to find what's good in their life and love their life and want to have more of it, they will want to have more experiences. They will want to have life extension. They will not fear the future, and they will embrace and empower all of the technologies and all the possibilities and abundance that we all desire and that we rationally are already are aiming towards. So with that, I hope that you all enjoy your day and enjoy your lives, and that you feel love and fulfillment and all of the things that are so wondrous and amazing and awe-inspiring in our conscious existence. And I hope we can reconvene thousands of years from now and continue the discussion and in whatever construct we're at.
Indeed, I think that is the best possible hope that can be communicated. So thank you very much, Gary, for that inspiration, for all of your insights today, and for discussing these ideas with us for 2 hours and 42 minutes. It is really greatly appreciated. And to everyone watching, I wish you all that Gary has articulated, and I hope that you live long and prosper.